So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on the time zone you're joining from. I'm Naufel Gadour, professor of child adolescent psychiatry from Tunisia, Monastir in Tunisia, and I'm very happy to welcome you at this 17th IACAPAP Lunch and Learn webinar. I can't believe this is the 17th session of this Lunch and Learn webinar series that IACAPAP decided to put together to provide some educational activities beside the 2 years, every 2 years conference that we organize, and the next one will be in Rio, Brazil. So we are very happy today to welcome our speaker, Professor Astrid Berg, to talk about a very interesting topic, the sensitive mother, according to different contexts in the world. Is it the same or not the same? And before I introduce Professor Astrid Berg, I will remind you that IACAPAP stands for the International Association for Child Adolescent Psychiatry and Allied Professionals. And our mission is to provide information, networking, educational activities for colleagues working in the field of child adolescent mental health. So this is the 17th IACAPAP Lunch and Learn webinar, and other will follow. First, I'm Naufel Gadour. I'm child adolescent psychiatrist from Monastir, Tunisia. I've been privileged to serve at IACAPAP as a coordinator for the educational program called the Donald Cohen Fellowship Program, with several others duties, and also to be among the founders of the African Association for Child Adolescent Mental Health. And I know I have good friends here today to listen to this talk. But I probably would talk more about our very distinguished speaker today. I've been attending some of her talks in South Africa. So we have a big chance and a lot of privilege today to welcome Professor Astrid Berg. Professor Astrid Berg is a psychiatrist, child adolescent psychiatrist, and Jungian analyst from South Africa. She's emeritus professor at University of Cape Town, and also extraordinary professor at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. She's clinical. She conducted a lot of work and a lot of clinical and academic interest in infant and infant mental health mainly, but more broadly on child adolescent mental health. She could put together 2 national and 1 international conferences about this theme of infant mental health in South Africa. She founded the Western Cape Town Association for Infant Mental Health with other colleagues, and she is the lead consultant at the Cape Town's Parents Infant Mental Health in South Africa. She's now currently working at the Tygerberg Hospital and in charge of the MPhil degree of infant mental health at Stellenbosch University. She's the president-elect, as you see here, of the World Association for Infant Mental Health. So the talk today will be about the sensitive mother and whether the sensitive mother will be the same over the world. The title is the sensitive mother the same the world over? Developing culturally sound infant mental health practice. So I will be enjoying listening to her, and I invite you all to participate to the Q&A session at the end of this talk. In between, if you have like burning questions you want to share during the talk, you may use the Q&A box, not the chat one, which is available for all the participants. Professor Berg, it will be a great pleasure listening to you. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gadour, for your generous introduction. And I want to thank the organizers, especially Yewanda Ushodi, with whom I worked some years ago here in Cape Town, for giving me the opportunity to present some of our clinical research work to you. So let me share the screen. So what I will do is I will briefly describe 3 research projects and show how clinical work informed the research and how this in turn led to interventions that are evidence-based. So that what we have is locally grown and not imported. So while this may be pertain to South Africa specifically, I do hope that it will speak to other contexts and other countries as well. I entered the community outside of Cape Town for the first time in 1995, after the first democratic elections. Previously, it had been restricted to only Black South African people. Apartheid had succeeded in keeping us all separate. I worked in that community for the following 18 years. I offered consultation services to mothers and infants at a community clinic. This occurred at a regular weekly time with the same team. I want to share with you what I have learned and how that has since evolved into research projects and interventions. During this time, I learned more about babies and parenting than at any other time in my professional life. What was based on direct clinical and personal experience with well over 2,000 infants and their mothers has since been researched and documented and has become evidence-based practice. I was grateful for my initial non-evidenced approach. That is, that I went into the community with an open mind, accepting and thinking about whatever case was referred to me. I approached each mother and infant diet with my background in child psychiatry, as well as with the psychoanalytic frame I had been trained in. I gave concrete advice where I could and should have, and referred to the Children's Hospital or the social services as needed. But when it came to parenting practices, I soon realized that most of these mothers knew more than I did about what to do with their babies, and that I could learn from them and from the culture they were embedded in. So the context in which infants live is obviously vital, because infancy and early parent-infant relationships are one of the most intimate domains of life. It is a phase where we are driven by our instincts of survival through closeness to our attachment figures. The way in which humans respond to these instincts is informed by the physical and social settings in which each family find themselves in. Cultural beliefs and practices inform parenting models. All or most parents want the best for their children and want them to be adapted to the society in which they live. And no society is culture-free. If we are in Europe or North America, we raise children to be independent, autonomous individuals. If we are in a rural setting in Africa or India, the children need to be part of a harmonious group where respect for the elders is the norm, where there is recognition of the importance of the other members of the group. These two styles of parenting, that is, independent and interdependent, are on either side of a spectrum, with many variations in between. Variations also existing within a specific culture and within families themselves. No family is culture-free. However, what has happened is that the rich countries, the weird countries, part of the world, and you see here what the weird stands for, have assumed a position of hegemony in the world. By that I mean that many international programs are based on research and publications that emanate from the global north, ignoring the fact that the majority of infants are born and raised in the global south and in the non-weird countries. What is missing in the research publications of our journals is data gathered by investigators who work on the ground. That is, clinicians who are in the thick of things, and anthropologists who steep themselves in observing and recording people in different settings. I would like to refer to, as an example, a recent anthropological publication by Scheidegger, who observed infants and young children in a community in Madagascar. His ethnographic research showed that caregivers, here mainly the mothers, focused on the infant's physical needs and kept the baby calm, while younger children were the crucial play partners. That the dyadic, distal face-to-face interaction that we see and code between mothers and their babies is not the norm for those mothers in Madagascar, and that we would be unfair to them if we use the established coding procedures. What I will present here are the outcomes of 3 research projects, all of which tie in very closely with what I experienced on the ground. The notion of sensitive mothering, the impact of mental illness on reflective functioning, and the paradigm of shared pleasure will be described, and I will underline them very briefly with clinical material. The interventions I will talk about show how we can support sensitive mothering, reflective parenting, and shared pleasure. And this work has been recently published in the Handbook of the World Association of Infant Mental Health. So, what is sensitive mothering? Maternal sensitivity is regarded as a precursor to secure attachment and all the positive developmental outcomes that this enables. And the usual definition of sensitivity is prompt, contingent, and appropriate response to infant signals. A sensitive mother is a good mother. So if mothers don't act promptly and contingently on the cues their infants give them, they may be seen as not good enough. Is this fair towards all mothers in the world? What does the local research show? And what are the implications for intervention? What does sensitivity presuppose? It presupposes a particular mode of parenting. It presupposes a safe environment. It presupposes the space between caregiver and infant to be free of worries and preoccupations. It presupposes food security, no hunger. And when all of this is in place, then a caregiver will be free to respond in this positive, intuitive way. In the sensitivity data, it is further understood that the interactions should be infant-led. That is, that the infant initiates and the mother responds. This makes the infant an equal partner in the interaction. We can see that this would go against the norms of an interdependent society where there are clear hierarchical boundaries and responsibilities. It would not be the responsibility of an infant to lead an interaction. In South African samples, it was shown that in periods of free play that were scored, interactions were largely mother-led and directive. These behaviors are usually considered as insensitive and intrusive in weird contexts. Furthermore, Dawson's study found an absence of social games, an absence of verbally based teaching, an absence of responsiveness during divided attention, and an absence of overt expressions of positive affect and praise. If we look at these purely from a cultural perspective, one coming from an interdependent model of parenting, then these absences make sense. Social games are played with siblings and peers, not adults. They are busy tending to other duties. Teaching follows an apprenticeship model. That is, observe me, the parent, and learn from what you see, not so much learn from our conversations or from what I say. Playing or speaking to the infant takes second place when something else or someone else in the environment demands attention. Positive affect and praise in the way weird countries show it is less often seen. The infant is handled in a loving way, but this may not be put into words. These are the papers that Nikki Dawson, my colleague, published, where she questions the universality of the construct used for maternal sensitivity. The infant-led verbal responsiveness towards a more proactive role of the parent towards the infant. In summary, to assess mother sensitivity, we need to be aware of the context in which she and the family live, the culture as well as the socioeconomic situation. Mothers are good mothers because they are raising their children in the way that is synchronous with their worldview, and because keeping their children physically safe is their prime concern. A mother, for example, who takes the toy away from her infant in order to inspect it for safety cannot be called intrusive or controlling, with the negative connotation that this implies, coming from a weird perspective. In addition, in our particularly South African historical context, there is a huge power differential. An instruction, play with your baby as you would at home, is problematic on many levels. As I've said, mothers don't play with their babies, other family members do. And being instructed by a psychologist or doctor, who may also be white, makes for a powerful instruction that she best follow. So if we see intrusiveness, loudness, mother-led behavior, it may not be that the mother is insensitive, but that she is anxious. So the questions we need to ask. In 21st century attachment researchers, they are now looking at other variables that impact on parenting and on attachment. For example, non-parental care or alloparenting is practiced by probably the world's majority, so that the dyadic mother-infant assessment and the conclusions based on this are hardly globally representative. Do we not rather have to think about group-based sensitivity rather than dyadic sensitivity? What kind of security is transferred to children who live in the village and who learn about the trustworthiness or not of multiple people in their lives? What is considered good parenting in the different communities that children grow up in? These important questions need to be answered through studies that start from the ground up. That is, where the informants are the parents and infants, and that the project or intervention is then based on this information. Briefly, implications for practice. I will give you two examples, one from my practice in Cape Town and one from Ububele in Johannesburg. At the UCT Infant Mental Health Service, I was respectful of the mother's way of being with their infants. In my own work in this community, that realization was what afforded me the opportunity to learn from the mothers and to learn about a culture that had been kept away from me. At the same time, we live in a modern world, and the mothers seen in our communities all want their children to go to school and to succeed. As Heidi Keller has said, formal education initiates a trend towards the cultural model of independence. Thus, there has to be a balance. My approach was that of providing information about infant development and infant capacities that are universal, and then leave it to the caregivers to incorporate this into their parenting practice. Working with a co-therapist or community health counselor was vital. Without this relationship, trust would have been very difficult to establish in the community. Rather than judging the mothers as to how they interacted with their infants, I decided to let the infant tell me about how they were. And this led to the biscuit game. And I will be very brief about this. I would place a biscuit at the edge of a table next to which the mother and the infant were sitting, and then invite the infant to play with it. I asked the mothers to let them do whatever they wish to and not stop them from doing anything. And it is based on Winnicott's spatula game. And here I show you I haven't put them up in videos, slides of two children. The first one here is a little child that was delighted with a biscuit, wasn't hungry, but squashed it and played with it. And I really was not worried about this child. This little boy looked at this biscuit for almost a whole session. He saw it, he looked at me, he looked at the biscuit, and eventually took it. And there was great hesitation, and there was reason for it, which I haven't got time to go into. The second program is that in Alexandra at Ububele in Johannesburg. This was, the Ububele programs are created in order to reach infants in the community at various levels. And they have several programs at different levels. I will only tell you about two. First is the baby mat intervention, where at a community clinic, two facilitators sit on a mat and invite the mothers to come and talk to them about their babies or anything that's on their mind. And this often is then the opening to further help if that's needed. The second program is home visiting, which was from the outset planned and delivered in close collaboration with the lay counseling team. Women from the local community here, this lady, shared their insight, and there was regular reflective supervision is offered. It's intense and an essential part of their program. The counselor had been trained or had knowledge of the neonatal behavioral observational method at observing babies. And through using this, like here is the baby following the red ball and showing the mother what the infant's abilities were. So again, it is an approach that provides information about what the infant can do at a very early age, and then discussing with the caregiver how this could be incorporated, this insight, into their day-to-day handling and care of the baby. And we visited Ububele in March this year and observed some of these interactions. And there was a mother who had the NBO done on her first baby and still remembers a lot about it. It was remarkable what an impact this simple intervention had. So this approach starts with what is universal about human infants. That is their abilities, which then develops into a personalized individual understanding of this is what your baby can do. And it is the first step to sensitivity. This leads us to the next port of entry, namely the reflective capacity of the caregiver. We measure or assess caregiver sensitivity by observing the interaction between the parent and the infant. However, behind the behavior, there is a mental process going on, both for mother and for child. It is this thinking, the mindset in the adult caregiver, that determines initially what will go on in the baby's mind. So reflective parenting intervention addresses the mental process that underlies or could underlie sensitive, attuned handling by the caregiver. Just a very brief detour, I don't think it's necessary, but you will probably all know this, but reflective functioning is the term used to measure the parent's ability to see how their actions affect the behavior of their child. So it's about the parent being able to identify the feelings that lie behind their behavior and how their behavior in turn then affects the feelings of their child. It's trying to understand why the infant or toddler is behaving in this way. And this would just be two examples of two crying children and how that could be interpreted in a mentalizing kind of way. Nancy Zuchman from Yale University in the USA established a program called Mothering from the Inside Out. She developed this for vulnerable mothers who were addicted to substances and who had young children. Its aim was to support the child's capacity for emotional regulation and secure attachment. We adapted this intervention after training by Nancy, and she had a very open mind about it, and that we were allowed to do whatever we thought would be appropriate for our setting. So we did this in 3 different hospital sites, as you can see here, and published a paper out of this. The point was that mothering, the reflective intervention, was applicable also to our South African vulnerable population. This was then taken further by my colleague, Joanne Vroegers, who did her PhD on work that was based on reflective parenting intervention. And she studied parents with mental illness. So my work in the community, just to get back to it after the biscuit game, was very much based on the mothering of the inside out intervention. Although I knew nothing about it, only came to me after my work that there's a lot of similarity. And I analyzed many of the cases, and this comes from the mothering from the inside out. And what she describes here is what I had done the years before. So what briefly the active ingredients of this reflective parenting approach? Firstly, to foster a therapeutic alliance, to have a safe, confidential space for the therapist to be open to listen to where the mother was at. Secondly, bestowing personhood on the infant and mentalizing for the infant, addressing the infant by name, talking directly to the infant as a way of connecting with the infant, but also role modeling for the mother. Then thirdly, unstructured reflective developmental guidance, as Alicia Lieberman does, creating a space in which the parent can freely talk. The therapist is curious and wants to understand what's going on, where this mother's at. She doesn't come with a set of rules or you should do this or that, but to listen. And the therapist then gives information about the child's developmental stage and what the mother can expect or not expect. And crisis intervention and referral to outer agencies where needed. So what was important of this intervention is that the principles of mothering from the inside out, very broad principle, are basic to, I think, to optimal mental health interactions across the board, and particularly in our context, where the mothers and infants were vulnerable, where there were language and cultural differences. Just to go through it quickly, so it's the fostering of the therapeutic alliance to create a space in which there are boundaries that feel safe and where feelings can be identified and reflected upon, and making the other, be a child or infant, a person in their own right, and wondering what's going on in their minds and giving guidance where necessary. And in the end, it is the relationship that matters. The relationship between parent and infant, between therapist and parent and infant. So I want to, go now to the last bit and look. These are the 3 ports of entry, and I want to look at the last part because I'm aware of time, of positive mutuality, or what is called shared pleasure. So the hypothesis put forward, let me go back. The hypothesis put forward by Kaya Pura and her colleagues was that if parents have a positive shared emotional experience. It is the basis for a meaningful relationship. And if it doesn't happen, like repeatedly, obviously, as in the still face paradigm, which I won't show, the attachment can suffer. So what they did, they developed a hypothesis that if there are shared pleasure moments, what does this do to the parent-infant relationship? And if we look at it, shared pleasure means the parent and child share positive affect in synchrony. They express it in facial expressions such as laugh, curving of the mouth to the smile, together with a direct gaze contact and a simultaneous or synchronized beginning and ending. And what has been found by Kajapura and our colleagues in Finland is that shared positive affect, SP, between mother and infant has been found to correlate with attachment security and is highly malleable in the first 12 months of life. It is an important feature fostering positive psychological development and moderating the effects of other risks, such as parental psychopathology. So the more SP moments they found early on, there was a correlation between that and the robustness of the child afterwards to even parental psychopathology that could develop. And it may be expected to be associated with lower levels of emotional and behavioral problems in the child. So we're not looking at negatives, we're looking at what is positive. And in the South African research setting, my colleague Anusha Lachman, whom I'm sure many of you know, did her PhD exactly on this, on the SP moments that she coded in a wide sample. And in our context, maternal mental health disorders are 3 times more prevalent than in the higher income countries. And this obviously places children at risk. And that we don't have a simple observational measure of parent-infant interaction that is appropriate in diverse ethnic settings. So the questions she asked is there a need to screen for at-risk interactions, but how can we do that quickly without burdening our community health workers and nurses even further? And is there a simple but effective way to flag up risk? And could we find something that is not reliant on checklists or English language fluency? And could we see the same reciprocal joyful interactions in resource limiting settings? And the findings of her study found that altogether, the work indicates that frequent occurrence of positive SP moments was present despite environmental and maternal risk factors in our context of lower middle income country. So that despite all the hardships that mothers had, they did have positive SP moments. So a better understanding of the mechanisms of underlying this extraordinary resilience was noted, and as well as how early mother-infant synchronicity is associated with better outcomes and may ultimately contribute to the development of interventions to further enhance early child development. So the bottom line of this is that SP, shared pleasure, may be a marker for impaired synchrony in mentally ill mothers. And she published these papers, which you can all source. So what did we do with the shared pleasure? We developed a basic infant mental health screening tool, which again, I won't go into, but the shared pleasure, the SP, is one of the 6 items we look at in order to flag at risk dyads. And we asked the community workers to look out for not only eye contact between infant and caregiver, but also are there moments of shared pleasure? Now, obviously, they can't be there all the time, but if consistently not seen, then we would worry a little bit about this, this diet and ask them to come back maybe earlier or to refer if necessary. So these 3 ports of entry: let the infant lead us, facilitating sensitive caregiving, looking at the caregiver's reflective capacity, and encouraging positive interactions between caregiver and infant. These 3 ports of entry flow into each other and are easily and usually part of a consultation. They are taken apart here for the research purposes. I want to end with the question I asked in the title. Is the sensitive mother, and I am aware I'm talking mother because they were researched, but we need to broaden this to father, to caregiver. Is the sensitive mother the same the world over? And I would say yes. The sensitive parent is the same, but the manifestation of sensitivity differs according to cultural norms, parenting ideals, and context. And I would ask us to be mindful of the tools we use in our research. We need to examine carefully the assumptions on which they are based, so that our clinical work informs the research, which then leads to evidence-based interventions that are shaped, that are grounded on local experience. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Berg. It was really very inspiring and also a very illustrated talk. So I just before I can give you some of the feedbacks in the Q&A section, let me just summarize for the audience who joined a little bit late, or the main components of your talk. So you first took us through the theoretical views of mothering. What's the purpose of raising a child, independent versus interdependent paradigms, depending on the society you live in. And then you discussed the word sensitivity, the word good mother, good enough mother. This was also interesting to be discussed, whether providing food, basic needs, providing other needs for the infant, letting the infant lead the interaction, or leading the interaction as a per se, considering the infant as a person or not. These are basic theoretical roots for the intervention. And then this is the beginning of more practical aspects, where you took us to your field practice, home visits in some low resources areas of South Africa, the Winnicott model, the biscuit game on the table, the reflective parenting, and then through experiences, through some research that you applied either on the mother inside out model that you developed from USA and you tried to implement in South Africa, or the sharing pleasure paradigm as well you ended with. So this was very inspiring. This is really interesting, and I'm, instead of just monopolizing the speech, I'll be just transferring to you some of the questions. So one of the first questions that emerged in the audience came, I believe, from somebody in USA dealing with migrant communities. And the question was, do you find that the interactions and play are based on knowledge and memorization rather than feedback, interaction, and play? So this was the first question. I repeated, do you find that the interaction play are based on knowledge and memorization rather than feedback, interaction, and play? And the participant added that, I ask this because we see that in many immigrant communities in the US. Maybe if you can just answer this, or if you prefer, I can. The other question will be about more practical aspects. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. I wish I could talk with you. I assume you are meaning that they come with memories from their country of origin, and they are playing with their child as they were played with, but their child may have adapted already and got new toys and doing things differently. So if you mean that, yes, I agree with you. I mean, the mother is still embedded in her culture of origin, and the child may already be in the new culture and with new toys. And I would but I would encourage her to maybe also incorporate the newness, because the child is where it is, and she needs to be able to also accommodate to what the child is wanting to learn about.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure if the colleague is,
yeah, please.
I'm not sure whether we can take live questions. I was asking our manager Sue, but in case it's not possible, I invite the colleague to maybe give a feedback on this answer, and I move to the next question. The next question is, what is your experience with the importance of fathers' sensitivity for mental health of children? The colleague, Dr. Ms. Vujanovic, is really, thanking you for the presentation and asking for the role of father. I believe you gave like a small comment on that during one of the slides. Thank you for answering this question.
Yeah, fathers were sadly in my clinic absent. I think I can count on one hand how many I saw in 18 years. And while that may mean that the fathers are not involved in the culture that was present there, fathers usually only get involved with their children after 3 when they start talking. So that was a cultural thing also. But fathers are, certainly in South Africa, very much absent. It has to do with our political past and apartheid and all of that. But I do think I know we must include fathers for very many reasons. The research shows that they have an equally important part to play. And we have done a small research project here where we invited fathers and their infants to attend to a baby theater, and then rated how they found that, being with their children for the whole day. And the fathers, they were from all parts of the community, were so appreciative of being included. And I think there's a lot we must do, and that mothers must do, to encourage fathers. It's not that they are always opting out, it's that they are not being encouraged to come in. But it's for some cultures, it requires a shift in infancy, because men are out of the mother-infant diet in the beginning. So it's a bit difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very culturally also bound aspect.
Yeah.
The next question refers on the implementation of the intervention based on shared pleasure. So the question was, interesting research and study. I wonder what made the team and you to carry out the study. It's a more general question. What made you and your team? What made you will to carry the study or want to carry this study? Yeah.
Oh, to look at this part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was. I think it came from the connection with our colleague Kaija Pura from Finland, who studied it initially. The Finnish colleagues did, and Anusha, my colleague, got in touch with her. But it is interesting, because it has been mentioned, how can we are always looking at deficits and what we don't have, and we don't look at strengths. And that was a model for also, hey, in all the darkness, there's light. And if we as professionals can also underline and highlight that, it gives us hope. It's more hopeful. So it's positive. And the research in Finland is really quite robust about how much those positive moments help to buffer for later adversity. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, emotionally, we can say that. Yeah,
Yeah,
we as practitioners in low and middle income countries,
yeah,
we have in our guts that instinct of doing things and maybe highlighting what is done not in a very
mm,
structured way by our
mm,
fellow citizens, but maybe being inspired by research done elsewhere can structure more our
yeah.
intervention. This is also something that can. Okay,
Mm,
very good. So the next questions refers to the links between attachment theory and the aspects relating to parenting. So I quote the question: Mary Answorth's first research was done in Uganda. How
mm.
do you relate the concept of maternal or paternal carer sensitivity to patterns of attachment? And the question is about the sensitivity of the mother of the father versus patterns of attachment. Is there any link here, for
Yes.
example?
Yeah, well, the link has been shown that sensitive parenting, or let's keep it to mothering because that was the research, sensitive mothering leads to secure attachment. That's
Okay,
that's that's
that's
the
the
well,
short
that's
answer.
almost like
Yeah.
that's short. That's why everybody looks at it and so on. But but the whole question is, I mean, in my clinic, just an example, I would see babies where the mother was not at all connected to the child, but the child seemed very secure and connected to us and was smiling and playing with a biscuit. And then Nosasana, my co-therapist, would say, it's not the mother who's caring for this child. There's an aunt or a grandmother that's doing the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, very good. Yeah,
yeah,
I appreciate the answer. So, next
yeah.
questions is coming from Alice Xu from Melbourne, Australia. So, thank you for your talk and speaking to the needs of diverse communities. I am a child psychiatrist working in a public hospital in Melbourne, Australia. Our community is incredibly diverse. Do you have any advice or guidance about how to assess broader infant community interactions within their cultural context? It's a very big question.
Well, I'm assuming that your mothers or your families are probably quite isolated and not living in a whole community of that culture. My advantage is I was one person and I steeped myself in that community so I could learn. And I worked with all my whole professional life with Nosasana, who is from that community. So my advice would be try and get a community representative or somebody from that community to be a mediator between you and the mother and the parents, also language-wise, but also cultural-wise. What is very helpful was for us the interaction, the triangle with me, Nosasana, and the mother infant, and that she would then explain to me in English what she saw and translate it also for the mother. So there was a conversation going on in our little group, and that was very helpful. If it had just been me and the mother, even if there wasn't a language barrier, it wouldn't have worked. So I'm all for the triangulation with somebody from the community with whom you have an open relationship.
Yeah, thank you. And getting back to our first question regarding the role of memorization in play and interaction, the colleague from the US, so she or he came back to answer us, and he's very thankful for that. The quote of the answer is, thank you for your answer. I also noticed that sometimes children present for evaluation for autism, for example, when we observe the interactions, we know that parents are often playing with the child in a way that looks more repetitive, like repeating the alphabet. Some of this we
Yes,
perceive as
yes,
part of the immigrant experience rather than
yes,
a failure in the interaction between the child and parents. I wanted
yes.
to just ask you to, if you have noticed this in the other contexts other than
So,
the autism, yes.
oh, the other context. No, no, we
No.
haven't. Uh, I have noticed, actually, I have noticed that in some of our communities, when you ask, play with the children, they will say, what color is this? What's that? Can you count to 5? And it's more about teaching and sort of cognitive stuff and not play. And when you look closer to that, they were never played with when they were children. So that's all that parent knows. And so in many communities, I'm not talking about the communities where the other children play, the Black African community is a specific one with the siblings playing and a whole community playing. But we have other communities where it's more the nuclear family, and we tell them or ask them to please play with your child every day, and they don't know what we are talking about because they have never been played with. And what they will do is they will teach, and maybe that is what the colleague is referring to.
Yeah,
it's
and
all they
she's on
know.
his writing. That is what we noticed as well. Thank you for that
Yes.
clarification.
Yes.
Yeah. So next, the two last questions before we just end this very interesting webinar. From Musa Usman Umar, how do you deal with mothers that are afraid of worried that the child will spoil the toys in the clinic? Mothers will be seen as attempting to stop the child from expressing themselves with the toys.
That's interesting. You know, with I can go into a whole story with for example, the biscuit game. To ask mothers to, that first picture I showed you where the child squashed the biscuit, it's actually quite hard when there's food insecurity and you ask the mother to allow the child to just mess with it, because it's food that shouldn't be, it's food. And so it's a bit of a sort of dilemma there. Yeah, and with the toys, I mean, with these young children, I would always ask mother, let the child just do what it wants, because I want to observe. So with the biscuit, it was harmless. And if I said to mother, it's okay, I will give you another biscuit, or I'll give you the whole packet, it was accepted. With toys, just while we're on it, I didn't bring toys. That's why I used the biscuit, because the children don't, it felt cruel to say to the child, give me the toy back and you go home. I only brought toys if the child could take the toy with him.
Okay.
Where there's such deprivation, you don't just, the child needs to take the toy home and give it to the community. That was my feeling.
Okay, it's a very good answer for that. And the last question, which is more of clarification on the availability of some tools. Thank you for your insights, Professor. The basic screening tool for IMH, is it freely available for wider use in South Africa, or was it for research purposes only?
The tool was put together from research from Europe. Again, with the help of Kayapura, we published it in Perspectives. We haven't validated it in South Africa, but you are very welcome to use it and try it out and validate it in your own country. Our thinking is that it is so basic that it could be applied universally, but we haven't researched that. So if you go into the WAME Perspectives journal, you can find it there, or ask me and I'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you so much. So, of course, there are many things we want still to ask Professor Berg about, but I mean, time is running really short. I want to thank everybody for this very interesting webinar. Let me remind everyone that an e-certificate of participation will be provided to those IACAPAP members who have attended the webinar and completed the survey at the end of the webinar. And please be advised that the survey for the webinar will be displayed on the browser only after the webinar has ended. I remind you that we still have other webinars. The next one will be in July, and you'll receive information about this Lunch and Learn webinar to be put together for July. But in between, don't forget that we have the big Congress of IACAPAP, the one that is taking place every 2 years. Next one will be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, from May 20 to 24, so the next 2 weeks. And we hope to see you attending this interesting Congress. Don't forget to visit our website and to join IACAPAP, because this is how we can go further and progress in the offers of services and of information, educational intervention that we can have. So I want, on behalf of all of you, thank Professor Astrid Berg for this very interesting, very inspiring talk, and thank you for your attendance, and give you appointment for the next events to be organized by IACAPAP. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.